Hey, Unlock listeners. This is a special bonus episode of the season. Your normal programming will resume this coming week. You'll notice that we feature predominantly vacation rental operators. That is to say, property owners, property managers who are on the ground, who are actively doing the dirty work. And we do this because we believe those stakeholders, it is their voices that are most important to amplify. It is their best practices, their discoveries that are most important to share. But that is not to say, however, that the world of software and technology and services, the people who fill up the showroom floors at the conferences, that those voices aren't tremendously useful and insightful as well. And it was one of those voices that I had a conversation with at VRMA Las Vegas. And eventually, as I find myself doing more and more lately, I said, Nate, would you mind having that entire conversation again so that I can record it and share it with our listeners? And of course, Nate obliged. Nate Wysk is the general manager of Point Central, whose parent company, Alarm.com, is a publicly traded company. It's more than 20 years old. And as a full disclosure, Point Central is also the longest standing sponsor in the VRMB media ecosystem. It was the very earliest days of the Unlock podcast that I reached out to the team at Point Central because I believed in its positioning in the future of vacation rental management. I believed that smart locks and smart sensors were the way. And graciously, Point Central accepted that sponsorship slot and has been a wonderful partner of this podcast every season since. Whenever I chat with Nate, I learn a great deal about the way that these tech companies maneuver. And in this conversation, we address where home runners like yourself should be aiming in terms of technology, how Nate thinks the tech landscape will be affected by M&A, mergers and acquisitions, consolidation in the coming year or two. And finally, Nate's conviction about some emerging niches in technology, and specifically water management and energy efficiency. I love these two spaces. If I were to pick one area to focus my technological time, it would be these ones. I'm also trying something new this episode. At certain points, you will hear a little bell sound that goes something like this. Now, what that is designed to do is to act as your cue, because the words and ideas that immediately follow that bell sound that goes like this are important trends, and they will be part of VRMB's 2023 Trends Report, which comes out the first week of January each year. So when you hear that bell, just like this, know that it is a chance for your ears to perk up and to take note. This episode is brought to you by Point Central, who you will hear from in just a moment, as well as Breezeway, property care and operations platform. And I kicked off this interview, as I have with every interview this season, asking Nate, what does home runners mean to you?
What does home runners mean to me? Well, in the context of vacation rental management, I mean, Matt, it's hard to come up with any other way to describe it better than what you have over time. But I mean, I think it's really cool that you've put a really particular, specific noun on what it means to be sort of an all-star in the game that is vacation rental, but is the business that is vacation rental. And from a vendor perspective, a technology provider perspective, it's something that we see every time we talk to customers, the spirit that is embodied by this concept of home runners. I think you've done a fantastic job of describing that. It was really exciting to see the launch of the video at VRMA, and we look at this as our home runners are our customers, our partners, and really the audience that we build great technology for.
And I actually got to meet you for the first time back in San Antonio at one of our home runners test screenings. What were you doing before moving into this position at Point Central?
Sure. So I think my title at the time was Director of Business Operations for Point Central. But essentially, I was covering all of our non sales and product teams. So our account management, customer success groups, technical account management and support, as well as general operations and sales operations. I'd been doing that for about 4 years. But that 4 years came off the back of being with our parent company, Alarm.com, for 8 years. So I'm going on year 13. And yeah, the first time I met you in person was in San Antonio at VRMA International, shortly after I took the role of general manager.
And so the short-term rentals within such a gigantic uh, parent company such as Alarm.com, under the umbrella of Point Central, do short-term rentals represent one of a number of different verticals that the company focuses on?
It does. So Point Central as a whole is the residential property management focused solution of Alarm.com. Alarm.com's core market is owner occupied homes, so smart home technology, largely based on security, smart home security systems for owner occupied units. There's also an Alarm.com for business. We're ranging from small, medium businesses through enterprise scale companies, as well as at this point, it's probably six or seven other subsidiaries. We actually have a company called Energy Hub that does demand response programs at the utility level. Building 36, who's a manufacturer of our smart thermostats and some of our smart water management solutions, and various others. But Point Central specifically covers residential rental property management. And then within the context of Point Central, there's two key areas we think of: short-term rental and long-term rental. So we also build products and solutions for multifamily apartment buildings and long-term single-family. But our start was in vacation rental, and recently we've just kind of broadened that to be more of an all-encompassing short-term rental nomenclature. Just as you've, I'm sure, seen this along the way, Matt, especially over the last several years. It's not just people on vacation anymore. There's a lot of people renting units for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks for work remote, not just taking a vacation with families.
And you have a unique vantage point, both in charge of Point Central, but also at this crossroads of a huge company and lots of big money and influence that is thinking about vacation rentals and getting into vacation rentals. What are your thoughts on how institutional investment is impacting some of the smaller, more independent home runners?
It's a great question. From the personal perspective of where we are as Point Central within Alarm.com, what we look at is we are able to operate with a very entrepreneurial spirit and a tech forward mindset, but with the peace of mind and the stability of a publicly traded company that's been building incredible technology for 22 years. And with that takes a long term outlook on investments into subsidiary businesses and really markets that are underserved by other technologies. And that was sort of part of the impetus for the creation of Point Central 12 years ago as we entered the vacation rental space. If I zoom out and think about kind of what you just said there with institutional investors, we look at this as we're not dependent like a lot of technology companies are these days on outside capital or venture investments or otherwise, which gives us a feeling of comfort and stability for sure. Being part of that bigger company while also still able to make product investments and other bets, but the sort of outside of our company, what we're seeing and what we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, but certainly ramped up in the last 2 to 3, is institutional money from private equity firms, from venture capital firms going into other companies in our domain. And that's not just from the technology perspective, like our competitors, or not even competitors, but other like PMS companies. It's also going in and when we're seeing institutions building units for short-term rental purposes. We're seeing consolidation of some of the smaller independent companies. And I know that when we go to a lot of shows, we talk to a lot of the home runners. There's sometimes this concern, right, that institutional investors are, you know, they take away the the smaller, independent, unique boutique feel that we're able to provide, or that
A
unique
soul.
experience, or the soul that that we're able to provide, or home runners can provide, that's different from traditional old school hospitality, right? Like hotels. But I think that the key here is to hone in on is the positive that comes from this. It's a validation of the space. It's a validation that this is a great industry to be in. The big money wouldn't be plowing into it if it wasn't a good place to be, if it wasn't a robust industry with a sound business model. So, the way we look at that is, hey, this is the rising tide that lifts all ships. We should enjoy this and embrace this, and it should help push all of us to keep getting better, from increased professionalism or standards, driving standards on the operator side, to pushing folks like ourselves to increase the pace of our development on the vendor and technology side to make better products. I actually think it's a net positive, and we can still have that soul at the home runner level, even though we see these bigger companies coming in, because it's validating for us.
And on the vendor and technology side, do you see more consolidation in 2023? And if so, specifically, what kinds?
So my short answer is I do. What kinds? I think it could come in a multitude of areas. I mean, I think what we're going to see, I suspect that we'll see, um, certainly the smaller, newer technology companies who have been dependent on some venture capital, just with the way that the market is going, are going to need to latch onto a bigger ship. And so I think you'll see just some natural consolidation of smaller companies that have good products, but just haven't been able to get had enough run rate to get to scale. Again, latch on to a bigger company, and it'll be a nice uh, uh, sort of a nice symbiotic fit for both of those. I think you'll also see some companies buying into other categories. So larger companies that do have the capital will try to broaden the scope of their services rather than deepen them. And then I think there's going to be some fallout and just some filtering out of companies that probably weren't that great to begin with. And this doesn't mean they didn't have a good product or a good idea, but didn't have the great business model or financials to sustain themselves. So I think there's going to be various types of M&A, as well as just kind of wind downs in 2023.
And that's also a case, an example in which if you're a property manager, let's say you manage 50 properties, and you're using a service that you really like, but they might be one of those services that took on venture capital and didn't have a long enough runway and have to, as you put, what did you say, latch on to? Have to basically get acquired in order to um, serve, in order to continue serving the customers that they do. That's actually you want the bigger company in that case. You want the company with a future that you can grow with. Liking small and boutique is fine, I think, in some areas, but it's dangerous when it comes to technology and services.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we often find ourselves talking about just the robustness, the reliability, the stability that comes from us being one in the market in vacation rentals for 12 years as Point Central, but our parent company being in the smart home technology world for 22 years, publicly traded. Anybody can go, and it's sort of an open book and see what our financials look like, and know that we're going to be here next week, next month, and next year. And that's not always true of every technology company out there, but it's something that we take pride in. And certainly at one point 20 years ago, alarm.com was in that other category. But through some good discipline, great ideas, great people, we've been able to build out a very stable, robust business that is going to be here for our partners. We think of our customers as our partners for the long haul. It's tough sometimes as a small company, as a smaller 50 unit operator, or a home runner, to think about making big investments into technology that is brand new. Um, Not saying it's always wrong, but it just, there is a risk that can come with that. Um, and and what you want to do is you're investing in technology because you're trying to have it make your life easier. You're trying to use it to be able to scale, and have the concept of your portfolio in your pocket. Well, you need to make sure that you don't have a hole in the pocket. You need to keep your portfolio there, and you want to be partnered up with somebody that you can trust is got some longevity.
And you and I had a really nice conversation in Las Vegas there at VRMA International about a new feature, I guess I'd call it, but it's also kind of like kind of an expansion of Point Central. Share the noise monitoring release and how it was received.
Yeah, so we released officially at VRMA International our version of a noise monitoring solution. Call it our smart noise monitor. It was extremely well received. It's a new category for us to be in, but certainly not a new category in the vacation rental industry. But it was something that we set out to build ourselves as an IoT company who has hardware experience. We make our own hubs, we make our own thermostats. We make a lot of our own devices, not locks, but outside of that, most of the devices that we sell into the market are made in house. It gives us a lot of control, a lot of flexibility, and we just trust the quality of it with the backing of Alarm.com and Point Central's engineering group. So we recognized that this was something customers were asking us for, and there's some other folks out there doing things like this, but we thought we had an opportunity to bring it in and not build it as a point solution. Not to be confused with a point central solution, but a point solution meaning so a product out there that does kind of one thing and only that one thing. So by building it in house and layering it into the broader point central ecosystem, you get that entire view of your portfolio and all the smart devices in there in one place. We're also kind of coming in and thinking that because we have an economy of scale where we run our platform, we have all these other devices in our cloud that we manage, we don't have really that many additional costs where we have to set up an entire business around it. So we think we can bring it in at a really nice price point, and layer it in with the standard locks, thermostats, and water detection services that we offer. But it is right now in version one. It's a plug-in device, internal noise monitoring device, privacy safe, and I think we all have heard the stories, that really some of the horror stories over the last couple of years of regulation and what that can cost a business, with fines in some markets being $1,000 for the first noise violation, 2,000, 3,000 from there, and then a loss of license altogether. So we looked at building this device as a way to help safeguard your business and be a great neighbor to those around your properties.
I'm a big fan of what I call advocacy technology, which is perfectly epitomized by a noise monitoring device. And it's it's necessary. It's obligatory. I mean, there's no way around these sorts of things. And if you're the first one on the block or in the market to have one, at this point, I think a lot of people have one. So it's almost like if you don't have one, you're at a huge disadvantage. But it really becomes a new part of the ultimate tech stack. No.
It doesn't matter. I'm always appreciative of your wordsmithing and the phrases that you come up with. I mean, advocacy technology is exactly correct. We have big ambitions to build upon this V1 of this device too, and some things I can't really talk about what the future looks like publicly just yet. But you kind of have to. I mean, it's interesting. If you rewind 10 years ago to when we were at the early stages of putting Point Central into vacation rentals, this was when digital locks, were still kind of a brand new thing, right? And in a way, it wasn't necessarily a regulatory issue at the time, but it's become ubiquitous. Like at this point, I think everybody we talked to, it was really refreshing to see at BRMA International. In a way, it's challenging. You talk to somebody about, have you considered keyless and smart locks? And I'm like, of course I have. And they're like, okay, well, do you use us or somebody else? But it's just refreshing to know that it's become that game changing technology. 10 years has just become the de facto standard. And I absolutely expect that noise monitoring solutions will become the same. Maybe even faster. And then there's some other ones out there, with some of the water management, leak detection, smart water valves that we can automatically shut off to protect against leaks and then the damage there. How that might tie into insurance plays and so on. I think that's another category that we see as having similar sort of path forward as people get more comfortable with technology across their portfolio.
And as I've become more comfortable with technology and I've slowly come to understand the tech stack and what it means to have a smart home, I'm starting to realize that, I originally thought the property management software needed to be the core of every great vacation rental manager's tech stack because it's what gets you close to the guest and the homeowner. However, I'm now starting to think that that core spine actually sits atop, and I'm not sure the exact metaphor to use here, but a smart home or smart sensors or smart locks, a lot of the stuff that we've just talked about, that's almost more primordial because it gives you almost more proximity, more information to those guests and those homeowners, more control. It's like a layer that I didn't originally see as part of the technology stack, but now I almost can't unsee.
Yeah, I wish I had kind of considered that exact question before joining and come up with a good metaphor or analogy. Um, maybe something that you and I can work on together here.
Uh-huh.
It's interesting, and I appreciate it. And I know exactly what you're saying. It is absolutely a part of. It's an integral part of the stack. I don't want to discount the the role of the PMS though in the operations. The reality is that is powerful software that is absolutely imperative and necessary to sort of running the accounting portion, the booking portion of the business. But yes, that's like a software piece, right? There still is this fundamental physical piece, which is turning what would otherwise be dumb devices or traditional devices, a lock, a thermostat, into information providing devices that give you better awareness into your property. And we think about awareness as the foundational layer. Once you know that something is happening, you can make a decision to act on it. So actionable insights based on the awareness. From there, being able to remotely control something, to go on site is a benefit and a value add. And then you build on and you start to do, like machine learning and get into the artificial intelligence side where you automate and address anomalies in creative ways. But at its core, you're taking very tactile devices, touching a lock or touching a thermostat, and making it, bring it to the digital world so you can just do more things with it. There's so much untapped potential there, Matt. Things that we would love to do in the future, but first we have to walk before we run in terms of analyzing and providing that insight so as to not complicate it too much. But certainly if you're managing 5 properties, it's hard. We know that's hard. It's a lot of work. Let us do some of that work for you or provide you insights so you don't have to be, because you can't be at 5 properties at once. But then think about that 10x, you get to 50 properties, then you think about 500. You don't want to scale linearly. You want to find an economy of scale there. As you get bigger, you want things to become easier and just telling you the story that you need to hear rather than have to worry about it all the time. So we think this technology provides a different level of confidence and peace of mind as you grow a portfolio. So it sits adjacent and it's really connected to some of the PMS part, which is the operations. But I see what you're saying. It's a kind of different world when you talk about the physical domain versus just the virtual or software side.
And I oftentimes find myself talking to new managers or managers looking to up their game. And we talk about smart locks, which is just de facto efficiency booster, change game changer. Like nobody who has gone to smart locks ever looks back and says, "Oh, I want to go back to having the original locks." But there's a cost, and
Mhm.
just wanting to do it as the owner manager, let's say, is different than being able to persuade all of your homeowners to commit to the investment. Is there anything that you've noticed to make that leap slightly more digestible?
We have seen, I think early on in our days, uh, most of the economics were being passed along to the owners from the operators in a scenario where those were separate, they weren't the same individuals. We have seen over the last several years a little bit of a shift towards that not needing to be the case because the property managers, the operators themselves, have started to realize and hear just anecdotally from their uh, other people in the industry who have used these, that you can extract the value on purely the operational benefit to your business as an operator. You don't necessarily need to resell this to the homeowner. Now, you can. It's a lock that will function and have the digital functionality, even if they leave the program, and that's great. And we see people still doing it. But what we've also seen is people just realizing, hey, by having that remote awareness and control of lock codes, I can do things like uh, audit the amount of time that a third party vendor is going into the home, and that's particularly important in sort of the economic environment right now, where you see labor costs going up from, so you got to send a plumber or an electrician, you might be at 150 bucks an hour. The amount of time that you save by not driving over there or not having them sit on the front patio and wait for you to get there for an extra 30 minutes, which could cost 50 to $75 of just waiting time. And then you know what time they left. So when they tried to round up an extra 30 minutes, you can say, I saw you leave here. Those are super quantifiable, and it takes only, two or three instances to realize that you've paid for the entirety of a lock. And that may be in the first 6 months of having it. So we have these types of conversations all the time, but I think that, yeah, what we're starting to realize is, or see is just people say, I don't necessarily need to figure out the way that I have to go sell this to my owners. I just know that this is going to benefit my operations from day one.
Hmm. I love that. I think that is key to any um, proposal or vision in which you need several partners to buy in. Really being clear on what's best, what works best, and can deliver the best experience, and inviting people to participate in that, and sticking to that, whether they buy in or not. That kind of confidence and vision, I think, is infectious. Um, Final question, Mr. Nate. Any predictions on the technology front that you don't think people are aware of, that they should be aware of for 2023?
That they're not aware of. I mean, I think we covered a little bit of the consolidation and sort of M&A activity that may happen already. So that is one area that I'm keeping a close eye on. I think that's a trend that will continue. Um, one of the things that we're seeing that I think is still under adopted in this market, but we see this in our multifamily long-term rental market too, is how valuable water protection is to any home. The data and the stats are out there about how much it costs when you have catastrophic damage. Excuse me. We see this time of year quite a bit of interest coming out of the more winter vacation destinations that have issues with freezing pipes at times, and so. Um, that's one that we've seen a lot of other companies start to bring to market. There's a lot of other point solutions out there as well, doing water only, water management, either leak detection or shut off valves, sub metering, where we're seeing the actual ability, especially in the vacation world, where we see units in multifamily structures, whether it's a condo or it was built entirely for short-term rentals, but you have multiple units in there. We're seeing more devices out there that we're looking at considering, and also maybe working on some things ourselves where we could start to break out usage, so that you just have better, again, awareness and visibility of what's happening at the unit level. And then the last thing I think I'll say is something that people aren't aware of. I think they're aware of this, but when we hear a lot about ESG initiatives, really in the macro level of big companies. But when we talk about big investors and institutional money coming in, I'm hearing a lot of stories about what's driving some of the institutional investment and some of the KPIs that they have to adhere to or achieve to realize the wish of their investors. And a lot of it is around ESG initiatives. So think about water management, think about energy efficiency, and things like that. In addition to the foot in the door digital lock, smart lock side of the business. And we're looking at. I think I told you this a couple of weeks ago. There's a lot of stuff that we're doing. It's not quite public yet, but I expect that we'll be investing in some more hardware rollouts that touch on those later in 2023 ourselves. But certainly we aren't unique in that. There will be plenty of people, I think, playing in those spaces.
What a lovely final idea to end on. I love me some good triple bottom line investments. That is to say, ways you can enhance your business, your bottom line, as well as the bottom line of other people, both guests, community members, and finally, the thing that we all kind of care about the most, that is our planet, where we live. So kudos to Nate for encouraging this kind of trend. And my big takeaway from the conversation with Nate is that technology and service providers, people like Nate, they have really valuable perspectives. They spend their days in slightly different worlds than fellow property owners and property managers, but their instincts and their observations are really valuable. And I'd like to use this to encourage you to spend a couple minutes the next time you're on the phone with one of these service providers and ask them what they're seeing, and ask them what owners and managers in other destinations seem to be doing that's working, and perhaps what are some trends to watch out for. I think the more information sharing, the more collaboration we can make between these two worlds of operators and vendors, the better our industry is as a whole. And if this kind of message resonates with you, consider joining us and over 1,000 of the world's most creative vacation rental professionals with VRMB communities. We together are collaborating under one virtual roof. You can join at vrmb.com/join. As a quick reminder, any of those little bell sounds that you heard in the conversation, those were little cues. Those were framing for topics that will be featured in VRMB's 2023 Trends Report. That'll come out the first week of January. So make sure you're on our newsletter list if those kind of topics resonated with you. Your normal programming will resume this coming week. Until then.